North Carolina, Priyesh from New York, Tony from New Jersey. So with our topic tonight, I know everyone know if you're already doing government contracting, you would know that we're currently under what's called a continuing resolution, or what we fear is October 1st hit, and everybody's like, oh shoot, the government's going to shut down again if they don't pass the budget. So, wanted to be able to have a speaker who can help us understand what that means for us government contractors. And so tonight, you guys were able to send in some of your questions. So I'm going to do a quick talk where I'm just answering some of the questions that came in. So some of you are in grants and you want to know a little more information about grants. If you're doing grants, I will let you know the difference with grants and government contracting. Government contracting means you are a nonprofit. So you could only, sorry, I messed that up. Government contracting means you are a for-profit company. And grants can go to nonprofits and other types of businesses. It can also go to individuals can apply for grants also. So big difference. Government contracting, you have to be a for-profit company to be able to do government contracting. So if you come to me and you say, hey, Varetta, I've got a nonprofit, how do I go after government contracting? I will tell you, you can't. You have to be a for-profit company to go after government contracting. So if you can't, the next option where I'm sending you is I'll say go to grants.gov, and that's where you'll find the information you need to be able to apply for grants. And that's the difference. In government contracting, you're bidding on a contract by sending in a proposal, a response. In grants, you're applying for money based on whatever it is that you're going to be doing to help your community in whatever that way is. So it's a different process. What the similarity is, though, is you have to be registered in sam.gov, basically following the same process for government contractors. And that's where we come in. That's some of the things that we can provide in terms of guidance. How do you navigate sam.gov? How do you find the information you need? How do you register your company, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit? Those are some of the things that we can help with. Some of the other things that we hear from folks are, hey, how do I find women-owned small business grants? So grants are not focused on a socioeconomic status. You would normally find grants based on keyword searches or a functional area. So let's say you're looking for something in health, or let's say you help your community by helping kids or helping men who are helping dads to be better dads, or you're helping kids who are sexually abused or something like that. You're helping your community in some way, so the government can give you money to be able to create that program and help those people in your community. That's the big difference with grants. Grants is government's giving you money just because you've got that program that you're creating, and you've got that idea of, hey, this is what my nonprofit does. We help. We're helping our community. So now you can go and apply for that grant, and there are a couple questions about when to apply. So once you go to grants.gov, or you go to the website for the agency you want to get the grant from, a lot of times they have requirements, and they've got eligibility requirements. And if you're a nonprofit, they want to see that you're a 501c3. Sometimes they request that, sometimes they don't. But there are other things that they'll provide to you. And once you meet the eligibility requirements, the next part is you just trying to apply. And you just go through the process. in grants.gov. You get registered in grants.gov and then follow whichever opportunity you're looking at. You click on it and then you go and fill out whatever information that they're asking you to fill out. A lot of times it's different forms. There are things you have to upload, so it takes time to be able to do that. But grants.gov, for all my folks on here who are looking for information on grants, that's where I would send you. If you need a little more information or you're like, I'm not sure still, at the end we'll provide a couple links to you, but feel free to reach out to us. We do have 15-minute discovery calls where I can just go quickly, provide the information that you need, trying to understand what you need help with, and then we go from there. In terms of tonight, so a lot of what we're covering tonight has to do with the budgeting process. And so our speaker tonight will be able to help with providing some of the answers to those questions that came in. So without further ado, am I sharing? Nope.
No.
Okay, I'm sharing now. Oh. So making sure I'm sharing and everyone can see my screen. Can anyone see my screen? Kelvin?
I can see your screen.
Okay. All right, awesome. So this V-GovCon DoD marketing package, this offer is only for this audience. So Kelvin and I came up with this offer. It's going to be only for this audience. And with this, it's just helping you if you're interested in working with Department of Defense, and helping with being able to market to Department of Defense, their offices and the different branches. So that's what this is for. We're gonna provide you with this again at the end, but wanted you to see it up front so that when we get to that part, you know that that was coming. All right, well, let me introduce our speaker tonight. So tonight we have Kelvin Funches, and Kelvin is what we're calling our defense financial expert, and he has background working with U.S. Department of Defense in the Navy, and most of what he's providing in terms of his expertise is in financials. He's done work in acquisition, logistics, and contracting. So anything in that area, he's been working inside of DoD, helping small businesses to come and get contracts. And so some of the work that he's done, he understands the financial industry in terms of how government does finances, which is totally different if you're out in the accounting world. It's a totally different language. And he also understands the contracting piece of it, the acquisition piece of it. So when government wants vendors such as ourselves, such as government contractors to come in and do the work, he understands what they're looking for, and some of the things that you need to be able to have and to be able to market to government clients, especially Department of Defense clients. So that's some of the expertise that he's bringing to the table. When Kelvin and I met, we met through LinkedIn, and you'll notice that some of the things he's doing with his company is similar to what we're already doing with V Project Management Consulting. So we saw that we were basically doing some of the same services, and I want you to understand in government contracting that, yep, we might be doing the same, but there's enough money out there in government contracting. We don't have to feel like, hey, I'm taking bread from somebody else's table. There's over $500 billion in government contracting. And at the end of the day, what Kelvin and I wanted to do is be able to help more small businesses go after that over $500 billion by giving them the knowledge of how do they market to DoD, how do they understand the pricing on how US government does their finances, their budgeting? How does that impact the fact that if they want to go after government contracts, do they need to know the government's budgeting process? Of course, because currently we're in a time, October, where we're going through a CR, continuing resolution. And I know you guys watch the news, you hear, oh, the government's about to shut down. You hear, hey, they didn't pass the budget. And for you, you're like, I don't know if I want to go into government contracting if this is going on. So that's why we're doing this. We want to share some of this information with you so you can understand how government budgeting process works, and it would help you in be able to make some of those decisions. And so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Kelvin, and again, if you're new to this, this is more of an interview style where I ask him some questions and he's responding to the questions. Um, and again, Kelvin has expertise. He's worked with United States military as a naval officer, so he's bringing also that background to the table. All right, Kelvin, just wanted you to welcome you and just let everybody know who you are.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone, and I'm happy to be here amongst this talented group, and also with you, Ms. Varetta, and your organization. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, Kelvin, what is the hottest topic in your industry today?
Great question. Department of Defense, future IT, construction, medical supply requirements, and also government shutdown, right? We're in a CR. Also, the government is purchasing a lot of medical supplies due to COVID-19. Of course, we've been dealing with that for a while. Also, they're looking at organizations to provide medical service for Afghan evacuees. Some of you may know, some of you may not know, we have received a lot of Afghan evacuees over here in the US, and we are providing medical services for them. We brought them in. Guess what? You have to house them, process them in, and throughout that whole process, they are going to need some type of medical services. So that is a really hot one out there today. But also the government shutdown, um, really important needs right now going on in the Department of Defense and the government. Also, people are wondering about the approved funding for the federal government agencies and the different programs. But most definitely, there are a lot of opportunities out there right now.
Awesome. So, based on what you just talked about, you heard him mention that government shutdown is one of the biggest thing that we're talking about today, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. We get new administration every 4 years,
Most
and
definitely.
a lot of times they're going through like, I'm not sure how should I approve a budget that I didn't know anything about. So they
Right.
go through. So a lot of times when they're just starting out, we go through the CR process.
Most
And so
definitely.
that's definitely one of the things that we're always talking about. So, Kelvin, next question is, what are three challenges in your industry based on the hottest topic that you mentioned?
Number one, finding the right company with the right skills at the right time, or companies. Number two, companies don't respond to the RFIs, requests for information. Number three, the government is trying to develop the correct acquisition strategy based off the companies, excuse me, that responded to the RFIs, requests for information. So those top three things are really are resonating with a lot of people uh, in the Department of Defense and also in government contracting.
So, you're telling me one of the problems that government's having is they can't find the right companies to do the work.
Most
And
definitely.
that's why we needed you to come here and talk about this because we have a lot of small businesses on this call right now who are like, hey, I can do some work, I can help. And they want to know how can they help government? How can they help Department of Defense to meet some of the needs that they have to meet their operational needs? And so you're telling me that the other challenge is that some of them are not applying for RFIs. So for you
Oh,
on the call, an RFI is a request for information, and it's where the
yes.
government's asking them, hey, tell us about your company. Tell us if you can do these services or provide these products for us, and let us know who you are. Are you seeing a lot of RFIs going out around this time for those types of requests?
Most definitely. And also, this is the time for the small businesses to showcase their talents, right? To talk about problem solving solutions and their expertise. And these are the credentials that they have in order to do the job. So the government will take all this information, and if only a small amount of people apply and your information seems to be good, when they put the solicitation out, guess what? They may improve, they may, excuse me, include some of your problem solving skills and your credentials in the solicitation. And then you go back and apply to for it. Guess what? You're one of the top contenders because they included your problem solving solutions and company credentials. And I think a lot of people over look RFI because they may think, well, they're just asking me a question as far as how can I do this job? Okay, what are my skill sets? But what some small business or businesses don't understand is that this is the opportunity for you to showcase your talents and talk about your problem solving skills and what you've done in the past. So hopefully it will show up in the solicitation, and then that makes you a top competitor for it, because the government does not know everything, right? So that's why they're reaching out to you, the industry, the experts with the expertise, to help them put together the acquisition. Okay, so they're
And
asking you for help.
I can tell you, Kelvin, that we've been through that process. I can tell you when we started, when I started V Project Management Consulting years ago, no one told me that. No one told me, Varetta, go respond to RFIs. I used to look at them and be like, they just need a capability statement. I don't have time for that. I gotta go
Right,
work on these bigger stuff over here. They're asking for more over here. So a lot of time I left the capability statement RFI responses because I thought, oh, that's not going to come out of, nothing's going to come out of that. I don't have time for that. And I can tell you, I've worked inside government where we provided the PMO type support. We're the ones writing up the RFIs requirements, we're the ones writing up the RFP requirements. And I found out that they're taking your responses, they're taking our responses, government contractors, small businesses, and they're taking our responses, and that's how they're creating the RFPs, the final RFP, the final request for proposal that they're sending back out to us. They're taking our responses on our solutions that we said we can do, and as Calvin mentioned, they're finalizing the RFP to fit it based on some of the responses we provided. And I can tell you, folks, what he's saying is true. This year, we submitted an RFI, think it was April, May timeframe. And by June, that same RFI, we got an actual contract out of it. So don't take this for granted. RFI responses are huge. The government can decide that they're doing an RFP, or they can narrow it down and say, hey, you know what? We know this company does exactly what we want, and we're going to give them the contract. Or we're going to narrow it down to women owned small businesses because we saw two women owned small businesses that responded and they can do the work. So I want you guys to pay very much attention to those RFIs. So,
most
next
definitely.
question. So Calvin, how is your company poised to solve these challenges within the industry?
Great question. So we aim to educate small business owners on developing a strategy on how to identify and secure contracting opportunities, specifically Department of Defense opportunities. We understand how these requirements are written and for what purpose. Also, we help them discover how to find out who buys what they sell, when, how, when, and how. All of this is done through coaching and training. Starting off as a small business owner, what I would say is find 3 companies that buys what you sell and figure out how you're going to reach out to them to introduce your services and products. So the key is to focus on how are you going to solve a problem, okay? Don't focus on your small business certifications. I know it's hard to. 8A, women-owned small business, etc. Pretty much that's going to be self-explanatory, especially if they're talking to you in person. They already know. Trust me, they already know. You should focus on how you're going to solve a problem, period. Also, some other acquisitions to look at, micro purchases, and the simplified acquisition procedures are some ways to increase your bottom line and build that relationship with the procurement office. Why? These purchases can be done with a less competitive process. So we call those low-hanging fruit, okay? Those are some great ways to get your foot in the door and and establish yourself as a company that follows directions, and that's going to make the procurement office's job easier as far as you being a burden on them and not following directions. So let's talk about the federal government, the federal budget process, and then let's kind of start off talking about the spending categories. Some of you may know this, some of you may not, but hopefully when I'm done, hopefully this will resonate with you as far as the type of spending that we really should be focused on that's really going to fund the majority of our contracts. So to be more specific, Congress develops authorizations and appropriation bills. They have the power of the purse. Basically, they oversee the budget, have the power to collect taxes, borrow money, and approve spending. So these are all our congressmen and senators who sit in the House and the Senate, okay? Now, the federal government is broken into 3 categories. Mandatory spending, sometimes called entitlements. And mandatory funded programs, example, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment benefits, veteran benefits for those who are veterans on this call. This legislation defines the eligibility criteria for participation and how the government allocates funds to all who are eligible, regardless of the annual cost to the Treasury. However, these programs will get funded regardless of a budget being signed into law by the president. So some people may say, oh man, the president didn't sign a budget. I don't know if I'm gonna get my my Social Security money, Medicare, Medicaid money. Guess what? It doesn't matter. That's mandatory spending, right? So you're gonna get your money regardless. Those funds are gonna flow. And a lot of your politicians are not going to touch some of those mandatory programs too much because from a political standpoint, that may not look good. So the next category is discretionary funding. Now, here's the one you want to pay attention to because majority of the contract funding is coming from here, right? So discretionary funding programs that have an annual allocation that is set the total level of funding they can provide within that fiscal year. There are 12 appropriation bills that are passed annually and to provide the government services. Unlike mandatory programs, if a budget is not passed nor a continuing resolution, which is temporary funding, the government will shut down and these services will stop in most instances. So that's why the federal government budget process is really important to us as small business owners as we become more cognitive of what's going on in these key words. Some of this you don't understand. Well, hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll understand what's going on. So basically, when they're talking about discretionary funds, guess what, people? They're talking about those 12 appropriations. And one of them is defense appropriation, which is a huge budget. And there's a lot of services under the Department of Defense. So we'll talk about that later. And the third one is interest, money paid on the national debt. Guess what? You have to pay that third category interest. And guess what? You're going to pay the first one, which is mandatory. So the one in the middle is discretionary funds. And that word discretionary, think about it. That's the one that they take a chop at to make sure they can pay the mandatory, and the interest. Okay. Now, let's talk about the 5 steps in the federal government, federal budget process. So step 1, the president submits a budget, which is a proposal to Congress. Those are your senators and congressmen in the House and Senate. And this budget is submitted by the first Monday in February for the coming fiscal year that begins October 1, ends September 30th. So number 2, lawmakers release their own budget plans and set overall spending levels with a budget resolution. Pretty much this is done by the House and the Senate budget committees. So they have different committees within the House and the Senate who does various things and have different federal government budget responsibilities. Step 3, so the House and the Senate subcommittees, they set the funding levels, budget authority for each program through appropriation bills. So remember I said there are 12. And when you hear the word appropriation, just think of spending bill money, okay? They are mainly setting the funding levels for, once again, discretionary funds. And these are easy target, like I talked about earlier, because guess what? You have to pay mandatory and interest. And then discretionary funds are in the middle. So they kind of fight over those. So step 4, the House and the Senate members, they come together to solve their differences in their appropriation bills, okay? So basically they debate and vote on appropriation bills for each of the 12 subcommittees. And when you get some time, just kind of type that in Google and look at all those 12 appropriations bills. One of them is going to be defense, which is a huge one, okay? Step 5, the budget returns to the president for his or her signature before it becomes law. Now, the president must sign all 12 appropriation bills before October 1. If not, Congress may pass a continuing resolution, CR, before October 1, which is what we're in. Some of you may not know what a CR is, some of you do. But a CR, which is the acronym that you hear a lot, provides the temporary, keyword is temporary, funding for the federal government agencies until a budget is signed. Guess what? You can pass more than one CR in a fiscal year. I've seen it done before. And guess what? It provides headaches for a lot of people working on the acquisition side, and then some of the small business owners. It just depends on how much money they have and how long they've been in business. So during this time, the government is operating off a percentage of its budget from the previous year. Also, no new starts or can be approved during this time. If a CR is not passed before October 1, then the government will shut down. So this is why it's important to have a contingency plan put in place in the event you cannot get paid by the government. Okay, so now the government shutdown is a hot topic right now for a lot of people. And if you ever want to find out what the government spending money on, you can go to usspending.gov, www.usaspending.gov, and you can find out who buys what you sell. However, the government shutdown, it can hurt a lot of people. Here's why. Some of you may be operating off a fiscal year, let's just say 22 funds, right? Because we're in fiscal year 22, am I right, Varetta?
Yes.
All right.
22
So say for an example, you have a fiscal,
1st.
say for an example, in this scenario is about 99% correct. Say for example, you have a fiscal year 22 contract, government shutdowns happen. More than likely, that program or that contract will not pay for you right now. Now, let's just say for an example, you have a fiscal year 21 contract that's played with fiscal year 21 funds, and that period of performance for that contract runs, we'll just say September of 2021 to September of 2022. Guess what? That contract was already funded with fiscal year 21 money. So if a government shut down, it's not going to affect your contract. You'll still get your money. Okay, we call that forward funding. So that contract crosses 2 fiscal years. Okay, so but that's why it's really important to understand, just because you have the contract, that doesn't mean that the money is going to flow consistently. These CRs and these government shutdowns will throw a monkey wrench in your operation and your financial plans. So that's why it's really, really good to have a contingency plan put in place.
So Kelvin, so I have an example where we just got a contract, and I think it was in August. So fiscal year 21, fiscal year 22 just started this month, October 1st.
Correct.
So if we're in a CR, and let's say the next government shutdown, if they don't pass that budget, or do another CR, we're looking at December 3rd. So December 3rd, if they don't sign the new budget or do another continuing resolution, you're talking about some contracts might be going through a period where they're not getting the funding, right?
That
So
that's that's correct.
the question
Because
I have, because our contract started in August, explain to my audience here, how does that work when it's
so
crossing two different fiscal years?
because your contract that started in August is going to be fiscal year 21 money. So that money has already been allocated towards that contract. We're good
Mhm.
to go. So in October 1, 2021, you're talking about fiscal year 22 money. That's what the Senate and the House are having a discussion about now as far as passing the budget. They did the CR, that's fine. But moving forward a couple of weeks from now or another month from now, they're going to be talking about passing that budget for fiscal year 22. And if they don't do it, they shut it down. Guess what? Funds could stop for the fiscal year 22 contract requirements. Fiscal year 21 is fine. You crossed the fiscal year. So guess what? That contract right there probably could save your business or some people who are operating off a lot of fiscal year 21 contracts. They're not worried because their money will continue to flow. But for some people, it could be their first time winning a government contract and they may not have a lot of financial reserves or they may not have a contingency plan put in place to get additional funds. And the government shutdown happens, it could really put them in a bad position to pay for their manpower.
Okay. Well, so based on your answer to my question, you're saying that because the contract was awarded in fiscal year 21, even though it's August, the money was already allocated on how much they're going to spend. So that means the
Correct.
money's already in a budget and it's good.
Exactly.
Okay. The other question I have, so I've been through some shutdowns before. If you're doing
Oh,
government contracting as long as I've been doing it, you've gone through some of these shutdowns, and I can tell you there are times when the type of contract that you have or that you're working on matters. In one case, I remember I was on a fixed price contract, and government shutdown started October 1st, and we were told you got to be on site still, you have to come in and you have to work. Now, the clients we were working for, they were told, even though they were government, you had to go home, you can't work. So, in that case, a fixed price contract, I was allowed to work. I do remember another government shutdown, and I was on a time and material contract, and I was told you got to go home. Government folks that you're working with, they have to go home also. Can you explain to my audience why that happened in those two different cases?
with the fixed price contract, more so the government already knows what it's going to spend, right? Fixed price. There's already that anticipation. There's already it's easy to budget. Okay. Now
Mm,
you're talking about time and materials. That price can be different from one month to the next month, and also you're going to be billing after you complete the job. So that's a no-no. That's not going to go because guess what? We don't know what it's going to cost.
mm. Wow. So I hope everyone understood. With fixed price, the government already know how much the services were gonna be. So because it's fixed price, the price was already determined ahead of time,
Yes.
during a proposal, that this is what it's going to cost the government. The government already allocated that in their budget. With time and material, it's based on a timesheet process that's used where if we put people on contract, it depends on, it's kind of like they're working, and then after they work, we submit the timesheet, and that's how the government knows how much that person worked. Even though they might have a ceiling that they go, that money's not totally allocated as yet. So that's the difference. So I hope everyone was able to understand that. And again, it depends on your type of contract. So you might have some of you here who are doing subcontracting, and if you are on a time and material or a fixed price, you're wondering why not? Why am I going through being sent home? Why am I not being sent home, and am I being asked to work? So everything again comes back to the budget and the budgeting process. So I wanted you guys to understand that because we see that a lot in government contracting. All right, so my next question, Kelvin, is so you talked about all these different processes and how the money, the type of money, and you talked about discretionary funding. So you also touched on what it is that your company does in terms of helping other small businesses. So who are your main target clients, and why should they care about the budgeting process and the services you guys provide to them?
Okay, so great question again. My main target clients are small businesses, and we want to help them succeed. Okay, so the federal budget process will provide some insight as to what the current and future spending plans are and how much funding the federal agencies and programs will receive. Specifically, the DoD or the Defense Agency Appropriations, this budget is big and has many different programs and agencies under it. So we really want them to understand the defense agency as a whole, and that there are a numerous amount of services from um, laundry services, from contracts to providing manpower for DoD medical treatment facilities, grounds and maintenance. So when you think about Department of Defense, we don't want people just to think, oh, they're talking about bullets, planes, and guns. No, Department of Defense is huge. You wouldn't believe what services that they contract for. So we want the small businesses to understand that and understand that, hey, these services out there are out there for them. We want them to understand that the federal government budget process is convoluted and could negatively impact their bottom line if a budget is not passed on time, like we said earlier. One term that you may hear, may not heard, budget sequestration. Those are budget cuts across the board.
Mm.
We want them to understand that continuing resolutions, temporary spending bills, and the government shutdown can be a nightmare for small and large businesses. So once again, having a financial contingency plan in place could help alleviate some issues with funding. But specifically, we focus on Department of Defense because it is so huge and we understand it. And we just want people to understand that, hey, if you provide a service, more than likely it's being purchased by the Department of Defense. So don't shy away from them because you just think only guns, airplanes, and bullets.
Great question. I got some of the questions that came in were, I think I had a couple people asking, I sell cyber. Does the government buy cyber
Oh,
services? I sell gifts. Does the government buy gifts? And I remember going across the U.S. and I've met some of you on those trips. And one of the things I let everyone know is the U.S. federal government buys any and everything. And even at the state and local level, they're buying a lot of different services and products also. So when I think of Department of Defense, every year that I look at the budget, their budget is took over 50% of the government contracting budget. It's Department of Defense is getting most of the government contracting money. So that's one of the reasons I wanted Kelvin to tell you guys that it's not just coming from me. Kelvin's saying the same thing, and he works in DoD. He sees the money going out. He knows it's there for us.
right.
But the question is, how are we going to get it? Right?
Right.
And so I think Calvin talked about that and how his company has helped other small businesses be able to market their services for specifically what DoD's looking for. And I can tell you, I've worked with several other agencies. DoD is like their language is like foreign to me in some cases. I look at their statement of work in PWS and I'm like, why do they need 126 pages just to tell me what the statement of work is? So they go through a lot. and and I know, Kelvin, that you've seen that you've been able to help other small businesses with that. So the question I have is, what are the key differentiators between you and other organizations serving similar needs?
Okay, so basically, we work with the small businesses uh, to help them and identify and understand those DoD requirements because they're so specific. And we do all of this with focusing on coaching and training. Like I said earlier, and you saw it in my bio, we have specific Department of Defense experience in financial management, acquisition, logistics, and contracting. So we really understand a lot of those DoD requirements and why they're put in place. Like Ms. Varetta said, the language can be very intimidating if you have not worked in that arena or environment before, because you may hear some military people throwing out all these acronyms, but you have no clue what it means. And sometimes they may put that in some of those solicitations, and sometimes they don't, but they try to spell it out. But if you've never worked in the Department of Defense on specific programs, you just have no clue as to what they're talking about. But once again, when you're applying those RFIs, and you become more resilient at doing so, you can kind of save those templates that you've done in the past for those RFIs. And when some of these other solicitations come along that are similar to some of those RFIs you did in the past, you just pull up those templates. You would have already been good at responding to things. So that's why it's always good to apply for those RFIs. Number one, you're going to build up some templates. And number two, you're going to build up that experience as the know-how on how to go in and say, here's what I do, here's how I solve problems, and here are the skill sets that you need in order to solve these problems.
And folks, if you've been through any of my training or you've heard some of the things that we have online, we provide guidance on how you get that capability statement. Because guess what? When they're asking for a response for an RFI, in a lot of cases, not all, but a lot of cases, they're asking for your capability statement. What is it you do? What is it? What is your core competency? What is the one thing your company does very well? Right? And then what are some past performances that you can show? What are your NAICS codes? What is the other information your company from a corporate perspective can provide to them? Capability statement is key. And if you are here tonight, you have not done that yet, make sure you put that as part of your 30-day goal. Get that capability statement completed, get it narrowed down where it has the main things that they're looking for. Now, you also talked, Kelvin, about, I heard where you're saying, hey, because we're kind of like in a CR, if you are doing government contracting, I want you to think about having a contingency plan. And in terms of financials, I can tell you that no one had told me this before, but when I got my first contract, one of the things that we had, we were just moving along. And then we ended up in a government shutdown, and we were told, hey, you guys aren't getting paid until the government pays us. And so we had to now go figure out that contingency plan while the train was moving. And it was difficult for us. So I can tell you guys, this is lessons learned. Work with your financial, whether it be your CPA, your accountant, get your books in order, your financial books. Make sure you have those financial statements, P&L, and balance sheet. Those are the two things they're going to ask you for once you start creating that relationship with a bank or any financial institution. And that's key because when you now get into a crunch where you know the government's going to pay you, but just because the president didn't sign this bill or in a CR, and you're waiting for your money to come in. It's during those time that that relationship you have with your financial institution is key, because now you gotta go to the bank or whoever and say, hey, we're still waiting on our invoice to get paid, but I've got people that need their paycheck, right? So it the financial part of government contracting is key, because you are running a business, and even though you know government's going to pay, you're going through some of these growing pains. But I thought you did great when you mentioned that they should have that as a contingency plan. All right, Calvin, thank you so much. And
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to open it up now for questions. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand, your virtual hand, and let us know. Or I think I saw a couple in the chat that I'm going through right now. I'm gonna ask um, Kelvin to answer. I think I saw one where to talk about an RFI. So RFIs, normally you can find those on sam.gov if you do a search.
Right.
Um, and that's the way that you can find that. Melissa, I'm gonna ask you to unmute and ask your question, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much, Greta, for putting this together. It's been very, 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 very informational. My question is, how successful is it to get a mentor protege partnership with the DoD? Because as a emerging small business, that seems to be the best approach for me in terms of being able, one, to gain visibility for my company, as well as to gain past performance, which is what I'm really interested in right now. Unless there's another approach. Sorry.
I think it's that's a very good question. I think it's a great idea because have you ever been in the Department of Defense space before? So you've never worked in that arena before, right? Or you have?
I have not.
Okay,
the closest to that is at the State Department, which is
got it. So that is a great idea, because guess what? Someone is going to be mentoring you from the inside out, meaning you're outside, they're on the inside. So they'll be able to explain a lot of things to you, terminologies, processes, step by step, and also get to expose you to a lot of things within the Department of Defense. Then you'll be like, wow, I didn't know they bought all this stuff. So I think it's a great idea, but also I think it's very important to make sure that whatever you plan to do with this partnership is written down, right? I would strongly suggest that it's written down. What are you supposed to achieve? What are some milestones you're supposed to hit in 3, 4, 6 months? I'll just say do your best to try to get things detailed so you can know where you're tracking and what you should be accomplishing or getting out of this partnership.
Yeah, Melissa, the other thing I would add to that is so what I have experienced, and I'm just telling you my experience with mentor or protege. Normally, it's a prime contractor who's doing the mentoring, and some of the problems I have with that is they might start out well, but they might have several other small businesses that they're working with, and a lot of times they're working with you because they want to use your socioeconomic status. So we had one that we thought was going to be great. We're like, we need help. We need mentorship, and the the company, they just wanted to use our 8A. And so it ended up not being good for us, not being something we wanted um, to be a part of. So just be careful is what I would say. A lot of times the mentor protege, it's a prime contractor. A lot of times it's a bigger company or a medium-sized company that you're working with for them to give you that mentorship. SBA has a similar program that they do with this. Um, and then there are different agencies depending on which agency. So we're talking about DoD tonight. So I'm sure DoD small business is where you can go and they would have more information on that. But that's a great question. Anyone else
Thank
with a
you.
question? So raise your hand so we know that you're asking a question, that you want to ask a question. Okay, while we're waiting on anyone else to ask a question, I'm just gonna go. So the other thing that so based on the conversation Kelvin and I had before this, one of the things that we're doing here is giving you an offer, and it's mainly for federal contractors. So that's why it's called V-GovCon. You have to already have a cage code to take part in this offer. This offer is for businesses who already have a cage code and you now want to know, how can I go and market to Department of Defense? And Department of Defense, you've heard us say, it's huge. They've got Army, Coast Guard, Marine, Navy, and Army Corps of Engineers. There's a lot of different offices and sub offices under DoD, and some of them do business differently. Some of them do follow some of the same process, but there's tons of work. But how do you market to them? What Kelvin and I came up with, and this package offer is only available to this audience. We're not offering this to anybody else. And what we're offering is for you to work with us. We'll work with you for 6 months. And in that, we'll start out with a strategy session, and then we'll start doing weekly group sessions with you to finalize your marketing strategy. That would include, if you say, hey, we want to focus on Navy, this office within Navy, Kelvin can provide the entry point of contact information. Who do you contact there? From the procurement officer information to the program officer information, and start coming up with a strategy as how you're going to market to them. We'll come up with templates, tools, different things that you can use to be able to go after that marketing for the client, the DoD client that you want to market to. So that's what's going to be included in this package. Right now we're offering it for $449 a month for 6 months. Or you can pay a one-time fee of $2,194. So again, this is the offer, and it's only valid for you guys today. This audience. Right after this call, about 30 minutes after, you'll get an email with the link. And with that email, you'll be able to follow the steps to be able to go and do that. I'll see if I have a chance to put that also in the chat so you guys can get that directly. But that's what we're offering. And the offer expires on Friday, November 5th. So please, once you get the link, make sure you save it and be able to apply for that. And then we'll go from there, which starts setting up your initial strategy session. Our next event is going to start on Tuesday, November 23rd. And I'll be providing a demonstration of our e-learning marketing system. So more information to come on this, but that will be the next thing that we're going to be doing at our next V-GovCon Live. So I'm going to ask again, any more questions? You guys are asking about the offer. I'm getting that. Any other questions for Kelvin that you have? While I try and get the offer into the chat. Okay, Kelvin, somebody had a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, question for you. I mean, for most people, government contracting. By the way, my name is Tony Widak. I'm from Cybersecurity Consulting. For government contracting, it's very, it seems like a tall climb for most companies. So my question to you, and Kelvin, is, do you normally produce any type of testimonial of, what your company was able to do with companies that at least been through your program as far as getting contracts?
Yes. Yes, sir. I can produce that.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the companies I've worked with, they were able to, like I said, I was able to help them identify those DoD requirements through coaching and training, and they were able to land some small ones to get their foot in the door, those micro purchases and those simplified acquisition items, to get their foot in the door and to build that relationship with that procurement office.
Awesome. Great question. Anybody else? Any other questions? Anybody else? Going once, twice? All right. Well, there ended our V-GovCon Live with Varetta Huggins. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you were able to leave with some great nuggets. Again, in about 30 minutes, you will get an email with the link to our V-GovCon page, and that has some of the information there. And you'll also be able to sign up for the next event. And one of the things we'll add, once we're complete with the video, we'll add it to the V-GovCon Live page also. So just give us about a week just to go through and make sure everything's good with the video, and then we'll post it. But thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your night and the rest of your week. And
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
coming on. Thanks,
Thank
Kelvin.
you. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
I just you want what is up?
Did someone have a question? All right. Thanks, Kelvin. Truly appreciate it. Bye, Kelvin.
Yeah.
Thanks
Just
again.
whenever you get a time, Miss Varetta, just send me an email that we can link back up.
Yep. Will do.
Further discussion.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.